Hello, my name is Michael. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. I know there are many videos out there related to this topic of evolution versus creation, and I realize this can be a very controversial subject. Some listening will immediately like or dislike this video as soon as I give evidence towards one side or the other. And may I ask that no matter which side you believe in, please keep your comments appropriate below and constructive. I do appreciate you doing that. Well, I plan to release a series of videos related to evolution versus creation. But as creating content for YouTube is new to me, the format may change over time. So for now, I will try to keep each topic short and just cover one or two items per video so I don't go off topic. I also want to make the videos short enough for you to enjoy and hopefully retain a piece of information that will help you with your belief. If I give too much information in one video, I fear you may miss something or forget something that may be valuable in the future. I realize if you believe in evolution, I can't use a reference you don't believe in. So even though the Bible tells us what happened, I won't use the Bible as my main reference. I know for those of you who are Christians, you may be saying then I should not be listened to because Scripture is the only source we should follow. Well, please show a little grace here. Paul says in Scripture, I became all things to all people so that by all possible means I might save some. So I'm trying to show through science here why you should either believe or not believe evolution. So enough of that preliminary stuff. Let me get to the topic for today. So that we're all starting from the same point, how do we define evolution? Well, a Merriam-Webster dictionary, one definition is simply a process of change. Well, I do believe animals can change over time. So does that mean I believe in evolution? Well, no, I do not. So which definition am I discussing here? Well, Merriam-Webster also has the dictionary, a cumulative inherited change in a population of organisms through time leading to the appearance of new forms or new species. The appearance of new forms or species is why I've decided to start this video series. We're so ingrained from preschool that there is no God and evolution is fact. Even though we hear the word theory occasionally, evolution is taught with such prejudice, students seemingly have no option but to believe evolution is the one and only option in life. I hope you will see via this video series why it is not the only option, and that what is being taught in schools today is constantly changing to meet the needs of evolutionists, with no explanation as to why what was taught as fact just a few years ago is now completely ignored and we're giving new information. One example, although it's from a while ago, is the Nebraska man, which was found from fossil evidence. We had tons of books written on this topic, about this new species that was found. We knew a lot about this proto-human. We even wrote about what it ate. It turns out, though, in the end, the only evidence found was a single tooth. And to make things worse, it was a pig's tooth at that. So the point is, we never hear about that anymore. And the reason for this is because evolutionists can't focus on anything that was incorrect in the past, or people may doubt evolution was ever true. Some of these different areas that I'm going to point out and quote, I will put in a link in the description. So the Nebraska man, I do have a government website that tells you this information, and I will link that below. So back on the definition of evolution. Evolutionists believe enough change over enough time can lead to a common ancestry of the entire Earth. So evolution then requires that small changes over enough time can explain everything we see. So how do we define creation? For this discussion, I will define it simply as God created everything we know. Very simple. So I hope to present in this video series evidence for why it is just as easy, if not easier, to believe a higher power created everything as opposed to everything just happened by chance via evolution. If we were made by chance, then technically everything we do is just because of some chemicals that happen to come together in the right way and cause us to do what we do. They can be understood then as everything we do each day is just happening by chance, that we have no control over what we do because everything is by chance. And that's how evolution is explained, how our complex body was created, just by chance. It just happened to have enough time and it happened to have enough random chemicals come together to create the right things. So I hope those who are questioning evolution or creation will listen to the science behind everything and not just take someone's word for it. Don't even take my word for it. Look up the information yourself, but make sure they're from credible sources. And one question out there is, why would evolutionists push so hard, and why would creationists push creation so hard? The answer is easy. They both feel they're right. But what's the ultimate conclusion to both? If you put creation to its ultimate conclusion, that God made everything, that's it. God made everything, including you. He loves you, and he sent his son, Jesus, to die for you so that you can have eternal life. If you push evolution to its ultimate conclusion, then we're all just random chemicals, a random chemical reaction with literally no meaning in life because we were created from random acts of chemicals. Even if we try to give life meaning, it's useless because it's totally a chemical reaction, and then you die and are never heard from again. I think evolutionists push evolution so hard because if there is a God, they're going to have to be accountable to that God, and they don't want to be accountable to to a higher being. That is human nature, to not want to be accountable to someone higher. So it is important we understand if evolution is correct or if creation is correct. So the one topic I'd like to cover for today is, can small changes really make a new species occur? There's so much that could be covered regarding this, and I hope to show a good summary. For evolution to work, it has to be small changes occurring over millions and even billions of years. That's what we're taught. I will get into the math in another video about the likelihood of that happening, but let's cover the logic here first. First, Darwin initially came up with the idea of evolution by looking at a bird called a finch. He was looking at the finches on the Galapagos Islands. He found different types of finches had different shapes of beaks, and he concluded that they must have evolved to have beaks that helped them survive better in the environment they were in. This finch had this beak for this purpose, and this finch had this beak for this purpose. That's not a bad observation in the 1800s, when we don't have a whole lot of other science behind us that we've gained over the last over 200 years. But to make a long story short, he uses this logic of a finch's beak being different shapes to come up with the entire theory of evolution. He hypothesized that all various finches on the island came from one finch species. But then he went further than that thought, and he explained that all species in the world must have evolved from a common beginning because of his observation of the finch. If a whole bunch of these finches came from this finch, then everything had to come from a single cell organism. But one question I have even regarding the finches is if different finches were on the same island with all the same environmental influences, why'd some evolve one way and other finches evolved a different way? I mean, we're taught with evolution, evolution occurs because of environmental reasons. So, how did one type of finch evolve into many different types of finches when they all had the same environmental influences? That's just something to think about. I don't have an answer for it. But let me move on, keep going on to the issue of small changes. Scientists today understand we do not pass on acquired traits we receive in life. There's examples all around us. I mean, if you have a scar from childhood, I have one on my chin, you don't pass that scar on to your children. When people raise some breeds of dogs, they dock their tails, but the very next generation of puppies still have tails. When I was in school, one example was given that was given us is why giraffes have long necks. We were told they consistently lived in areas where that food was higher up, and giraffes had to stretch their necks to get to the food. But we already know acquired traits do not pass on to the offspring. So why do these acquired traits not pass on to the offspring? Well, this is obviously all due to what Charles Darwin never knew about, and that's DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. Any trait that I acquire in life does not change my DNA to pass on to my offspring. So when we talk about a ton of small changes eventually leading to a new species, what are we talking about? If we acquire in our life, if what we acquire in our lifetime do not pass on to our offspring, when do these DNA changes take place in our offspring that we would be passing on? So we're talking about something that would have to change the DNA in our body. So let me quote David Gelernter. Again, I will put a link below to his, or a reference below to the book where I found this. He's speaking of genes, genes in your body, which basically means about the DNA changes in our body. I'm going to use that loosely there, but it's genes changing in your body, which is DNA changes. And he writes this, quote, "To help create a brand new form of organism, a mutation must affect a gene that does its job early." This means, end quote right now. This means early in the beginning of, right after conception, not after the baby's born. So I'll continue on here. That does its job early and controls the expression of other genes that come into play as the organism grows. Evidently, there are a total of no examples in literature of mutations that affect early development and the body plan as a whole and are not fatal, end quote. So help state that a little better. In order to change the direction of an animal, to change from one form to another, you have to start early in its life, at conception. This means it has to mutate the DNA at the very beginning of the development. And what he is saying here is if the gene changes too late, it doesn't affect it. If the change is too early, every example we've ever seen has been fatal. So if the DNA changes come later in the development of the fetus, it will not really make any major changes to direct them to a new species. And again, if they come too early, there are so many things that depend on that first correct change for an eyeball to form, that if this doesn't happen, everything after it won't happen either, which makes it fatal. So basically, we're saying slow, methodical changes just can't produce a new species, and science has no proof it ever did. I could go further with this topic, but I really don't need to. So scientists realize that the slow conversion to a new species could not physically happen, let alone the fact that we don't have fossil evidence showing the millions of changes it took to go from a monkey to a man, let alone any fossil evidence of any other animal to any other animal. I mean, we can look at mini horses going to big horses, but it's still a horse to a horse. And we can look at small humans going to big humans, but it's still human to human. We already know that two separate species cannot mate and produce fertile offspring. A horse and a donkey can produce a mule, but the mule is not capable of producing offspring itself. We also know one species cannot just spontaneously have a different species of offspring. No one has ever witnessed one animal have another species of animal naturally. So from what we can witness today, a species or two separate species cannot produce a new species in their offspring. So that's just the big picture. Regarding evolution now, life is so complex that you simply can't say it made it there slowly. In the same way, you can't take a complex programming language and say it just happened by ones and zeros slowly combining someplace in space to form a new computer language. If we look at a cell phone, it's obvious that it was created. If we look at a house, it is obvious someone created it. One reason we understand this is because we understand something that is complex doesn't create itself. A creator has to have designed it, gathered the raw materials, and built it. If we were to even scratch at the surface of how complex our bodies are, I believe we can see our bodies are millions of times more complex than the best computer or cell phone out there. Even today, the fastest computers out there are still way slower than our brains are. So why is it easy for us to know for sure a cell phone or computer was created by a creator, but humans were not created by a creator? The complexity of changes that has to happen are almost unfathomable for one species to change to another species, especially if you just go one small change at a time. If the changes do occur, and mutations do occur, an extremely high percentage of those simply don't add to the quality of life. And if they were passed on, the quality of life doesn't improve, it gets worse. See, evolutionists either ignore this or say, well, obviously, since we got here, beneficial mutations did occur and they were compatible with life. But using science, we do not have any current evidence that mutations are good and are passed on to offspring. In another video, I do hope to talk very specifically about DNA, how mutations are always DNA losing information, never gaining information. I guess you could say sometimes, well, I know you could say sometimes DNA will duplicate the same information so the string is longer, but it didn't actually gain any new information through that. We'll also see in future videos, if we did evolve from millions of small changes over the millennia, where's the fossil evidence? So we'll really study the fossil evidence. It simply isn't there. Evolutionists say they can point to a handful of humans like skeletons and say that that's proof. But to me, that's just proof that humans come in all shapes and sizes. Even today, we can find them in all shapes and sizes, from 24 inches tall to 9 feet tall. Maybe not quite 9 feet today, but tall. Depending on how they were fossilized, we've most likely just found various types of humans. Either way, if we evolved over millions of tiny changes, we should be seeing millions of variations, not just a handful. And where are the variations of all the other species on top of that? Evolutionists like to pick humans, but what about the fossil proof of all the other animals out there? Fossil evidence just doesn't exist, and the few that they point to are simply not enough evidence if we were truly evolved over millions of tiny changes. Well, thank you so much for listening to my first video. I'm sure there will be those who agree and those who do not. If you do like this, I'm new to this, I would love you to give it a thumbs up. I would love you to subscribe if you want to hear my future videos. I will be releasing videos as often as I can to help with this topic. And also, I would love your help. If you have any topics you would like covered, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I would hope to get to them. Have a great day, and thank you so much for listening.